Well, first of all, I'm Karen Hudson. Sally, I don't think I've met you, and Mila, I haven't met you, but Erin, I haven't met you, and Jennifer, I don't think we've met either, but I'm with Illinois Citizens for Clean Air and Water and also with the Socially Responsible Ag Project. And I've been fighting CAFOs since the fall of 1996. I just started fighting it any way I knew how, you know, and I learned along the way. And Danny's taught me quite a bit. Danielle Diamond is with us tonight from SRAP, and she co-founded Illinois Citizens for Clean Air and Water with me and Dr. Kendall Thu. And we help folks around the state understand the law, provide talking points, just coach them in any way that we possibly can to provide factual information to them about CAFOs. And then they take that back to their communities and decide if they want to oppose one of these in their communities. So we don't tell people what to do. We provide all the information to you, and everybody knows that already. But so that's me. And Danny, I'd like you to go next, and then we'll go, after that, we'll go with Crystal.
Okay, very good. So as Karen mentioned, Danielle Diamond and I co-founded Illinois Coalition for Clean Air and Water with Karen and Dr. Kendall Thu out of NIU University, and actually went and studied with Dr. Thu a couple years after I graduated from law school. So I was in private practice for a little bit, but then went back and studied. He was studying, he's an environmental anthropologist, and he was studying the public health and community impacts that CAFOs were having on surrounding communities. And that is how I got into this work. And that was, oh my God, close to 20 years ago, I think, which is crazy. But he asked me to, when I came to work with him, research whether or not Illinois was implementing and enforcing the Clean Water Act the way it should be. And at that time, I didn't even know what an NPDES permit was, but that was what he asked me. He said, would you like to come and research NPDES permits and CAFOs with me? And I didn't know what either one of them were, really. And so, but I became acquainted with Albert Edinger, who's on our call tonight, who I thank very much for being here. And others, Karen is actually my mentor. I've started researching and figuring out things, and the shocking truth was that Illinois wasn't doing anything to implement and enforce the Clean Water Act against CAFOs. And so that is what started my career off. And I've been working in Illinois ever since, and I can't let go of it because I've been working there for so long and I'm very invested. But Karen actually also probably got me my job at SRA Project, and I've worn several hats with this organization, but work all over the country now, not just in Illinois, but all over the country. So we see these issues everywhere, and we try to help whoever we can when we can. So that's a little bit of my background.
Danny's research on the Illinois' failure to implement the NPDES permit system in Illinois was published in the Drake Journal of Ag Law. And then she used some of that information to do what's called a de-delegation petition to the federal EPA based on the fact that Illinois EPA was not implementing the Clean Water Act. So we did something very good, and that's still on the table because things are still not up to par. And we could talk about that here.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Karen, but that petition to withdraw the state's authority to administer the Clean Water Act is still pending. And US EPA actually did an investigation, almost a 2-year investigation of the state in response to that petition, and agreed with nearly every single allegation that we made, that it was failing to issue these permits that we're about to talk about tonight, that it wasn't, if it was issuing them, it wasn't properly enforcing them. There wasn't proper enforcement. The Illinois EPA wasn't properly following up on citizen complaints, had no idea where all the CAFOs were. And this regulatory agency, the Illinois EPA, is responsible for protecting the environment and regulating these things. And they didn't know where they were at the time. In fact, I think Karen got a call from the federal EPA once, and they were asked her if she knew where all the CAFOs were in Illinois. And so, but US EPA delegates its authority to the state of Illinois to administer these regulations. And so this petition that Karen mentions, that is still pending because the state still isn't doing what it needs to. And that's one of the reasons why we really get involved in this permitting process, because this general permit actually was supposed to be issued about 5 or 6 years ago, and they just haven't issued one. So anyway, there's a lot of story behind that, but I just wanted
A lot
to
of story around that, but Danny did so much work on
highlight
that. Thank you so much, Danny. I mean, it really makes a difference. This, you know, citizens can file under the Clean Water Act a citizen's suit. So that's what we did. So Crystal, do you want to quickly just say where you're from and what you're involved in? We do love you dearly, and go for it.
Thank you.
I'm Crystal Clare. I'm from Adams County. My husband and I are organic farmers, and we've been fighting a hog confinement, a 5,000 head hog confinement for 2.5 years. They went ahead and built it. But long story short, we're making progress. If nothing else, the EPA is listening. We have the Attorney General involved. It kind of helps that the CAPA owner has threatened my life. Received a strangulation device anonymously in the mail. Follow us, and we report all these things. And on a first name basis with one of the inspectors at the Attorney General's office. So I don't know when it will happen, but I'm very confident that the EPA is going to wake up and realize that their lack of actions have allowed this particular person to get away with some things for water pollution violations he's had and an air pollution violation, and never corrected them. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Dennis. Dennis is from Winnebago County. Dennis Johnson.
Yeah. Yes, I guess I'm new. I've only been at this since May of last year, when we discovered they were going to put 2 5,000 hog CAFOs within 3 miles of each other in Winnebago County, northwest Winnebago County. And ever since then, I've gotten an education on these facilities and how crazy the law is, as in there's no law. So yeah, we are fighting it. And so far we've managed to keep it delayed. Not making a lot of friends with the people who want to put it in, but everybody else in the community seems to like us. So we're doing okay.
Thanks, Dennis. Joyce is from Peoria County.
Yeah, Joyce Harrent. I did some work, I guess 20 years ago or 25 years ago with Karen around CAFOs, and then I sort of drifted away from that and got involved with environmental issues. And I noticed Albert Ettinger on here. He was instrumental in helping us close the Edwards coal plant. So, but I'm glad to see if I can do anything for this particular hearing.
Thank you. How about Tom and Julie Walsh?
Hi, I'm new as Dennis is. We live just a few miles apart. Both of us are in between the two proposed CAFOs. Dennis and I go back a long ways. We raised popcorn when we were riding bikes. We went to school together, graduated, and went to the University of Illinois together, and been good friends for a long time. So we appreciate all this good information, this great help this group has provided. Thank you.
So Patty Wyrick, down in Southern Illinois.
Hello, I'm Patty. I live in Carbondale, which is in Southern Illinois. We have a CAFO that has come in, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago or so. It's a small CAFO, so it didn't have any regulations. We went to the county board and talked to them. We had a petition with hundreds and hundreds of signatures, all to no avail. no one would have even known about the CAFO going in had it not been word of mouth. And the CAFO is also located a quarter mile uphill from our city's water reservoir. So, yeah, I feel we need to have better regulations.
Okay. Sally Burgess?
Hi, everyone. Sally Burgess. I'm the downstate organizer with the Sierra Club Illinois chapter. Haven't done any work on CAFOs, have been outraged about CAFOs since the 90s. And I'll have to stay focused on keeping this on water because my outrage has been about the way the animals and farmers are treated and the people around it. So glad to be here.
Thank you. Jennifer Elongi? Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, it's Alonji. We've actually met Karen. Joyce,
I'm sorry.
Joyce Blumenshine brought me to the last in-person meeting you guys had.
Okay,
So-
I apologize.
No, that's okay.
I
That's okay.
can't
That was a long
remember-
time.
I can't remember faces.
That's okay. A lot's happened between now and then.
I know. So we
yeah.
got, go ahead, Jennifer, go ahead.
Okay. I'm also with the stairs. Actually, a lot of Sierra Club faces. I recognize a lot of these folks on here. But I'm with the Sierra Club in Sangamon Valley, which is in Sangamon County. And so Joyce introduced me to your organization a couple of years ago. But I was a future farmer in California. So I'm kind of with Sally. I've always hated these things because of what it does to the animals and to the people that work inside of them. But we're all kind of here, I think, at least for me now, it's kind of a water issue. We've been working on a big watershed project in the county. And so I want to do everything I can to protect the water here in Illinois.
Jennifer, yeah, I can share some new water research I have too, so get with me.
So that would be amazing.
Lois, did we do you? I have a short memory. Did we?
Did you say Lois?
Well, yes.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
I'm with the Sierra Club Prairie Group in Urbana. And actually, I'm never have done any actual real work, but I certainly learned about CAFOs when I was living in Tucson. You know, this is like 22 years ago, and I had trouble remembering what CA, you know what I mean? When they first started being out, I was like, now what does that mean again? And like other people, you know, members of various groups, I've been a member of Food and Water Watch for a decade, and Food and Water Watch CAFOs has been one of their issues. And now with Sierra Club for a couple of years. So it's just one of those things that's just, you just can't believe, like, what is happening? This is crazy. This is nuts for utterly animals, water, air, people, everything. So when I saw this to help write a comment or whatever, I thought I'd like to join this. So
Thank you so much, Lois. It's nice we have a cross section of people from all over the state. Who did I miss? Mila, did we?
Hi, yes, my name is Mila. It's Mila.
Hi, Mila.
Hi, Karen. So I am the clean water advocate from the Illinois Sierra Club chapter. So hey to everybody from the Sierra Club. Really happy to be here. I learned about this through our kind of new approaches for how we address permitting with the clean water team. So we have been kind of focusing on our NIPIDs permit process and subsequently 404s, and then CAFOs came up. So I know that we don't have like a heavy touch on CAFO permitting. And so this is an opportunity for me, one, to, do what it is that I do, which is support the protection and health of Illinois clean water through every possible avenue, but then also learn a little bit about the organization and other opportunities for us to tie in our volunteers.
I would love to tie in with you, Mila. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Barb, did I miss you? Barbara?
Yes, just unmuting here. Yeah, I'm with Shawnee Group Sierra Club, Illinois chapter. And along with Patty, yeah, we worked against this CAFO, it's chickens, very close to our drinking water source for Carbondale. And so, you know, I've been, well, we do have our water laboratory here in Carbondale. That's really good. And they have continued to do water monitoring close to that CAFO. But, you know, we're afraid that they'll expand and we don't know, you know, they can expand almost at will from what I understand.
Yeah.
So, and then also we have had in the past worked with a neighbor across the street from the facility, and she has been keeping a diary of the odors, their symptoms, everything. So I've been trying to get in touch with her the last couple of days. So just working on.
Yeah, if you'd like to get in touch with me, there's many times folks don't get very far with EPA. And if I or Danny will send a letter, which I recently did for dead swine carcasses that were spread before Thanksgiving that still have not been removed 14 feet from someone's well.
Wow.
You know, we try to go all the way to the top. So I would love to help her out in any way that I can via a letter or whatever. But we could talk about that
sure.
later. Yeah.
Yeah, we got State Senator Schimpf to come to their house and see, you know, their situation. He at least got her in touch with somebody, you know, an inspector with EPA. So she has a direct contact with somebody.
Okay. I'd like to talk to her. So we'll get together after the call. I think we talked to everyone. Aaron, you talked, right? Did we introduce you?
Jane Kogi.
Oh, Jane. Sorry, Jane. I see.
No, that's okay. I arrived late. And down here in Carbondale, we enjoyed your giving the presentation that you did. Patty Wyrick invited you down to Carbondale, I believe, a number of years back, and that was very helpful at the time. Yeah, so I don't have to repeat what Barb and Patty have said, except that it seems outrageous that Illinois does not have the regulations that many of our fairly conservative states have. And the Sierra Club had it as one of its issues, the issues briefing for a bill, but it, you know, it didn't have much chance of passing given the Farm Bureau and some other, but you know, it seems worth pushing because it is pretty outrageous. The loopholes in the way the plants are approved. You can start with a minimum, then just keep adding, doubling that without at least with chickens, you can double it without
everything.
any other approval. So
Danielle put together a very good chart comparing our state to all these other states. I think you've seen it. I probably brought that with
it wouldn't hurt to have that.
Okay, I can just email me and I'll get that to you. Danny, do you want to go ahead and start?
Well,
talking?
I'll just say Albert's here for what it's worth.
Albert.
Oh, Al, Al, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Danny's the expert here. She wanted me to be on just in the incredibly unlikely possibility that she slipped from the trapeze. I'm the extra in the net, but it's not likely. So I'll be unaccustomedly quiet. Holy thing.
No, seriously, I begged Albert to come, and thank you so much, Albert.
Thank you, Albert.
I've been calling Albert since I started working on this issue 20 years ago. So, but no, one of the reasons I really thought it would be important for Albert to be here, not only because of his knowledge and background area of expertise, but he's done more work in this sort of forum, in like the Illinois EPA hearing forum, pollution control board type hearing. So any kind of questions that relate to the process and whatnot, he's going to be much better person to answer, because that's not necessarily my realm. But But yes, let's, Karen, if you're ready,
I just
I
want to
can.
be clear that I was 19 years old when she called me 20 years ago.
No. Okay.
Your birthday
So
was
maybe I'm
yesterday.
exaggerating. Wait, maybe not quite 20.
I think we all were.
Good point.
So
So
Danny, is tomorrow the last day to sign up then?
yes, I think you have to sign up by the 23rd, so that's tomorrow, and that sign up to give comments. And please, all of you who have like neighbors and members and the Sierra Club membership and any other organizations that you're tied into, if you could encourage people to sign up to give a comment, or you can also provide written comments still, which I wasn't aware of until I carefully read that notice. But what's coming up, what people really should register for is to give oral comments, and then you can always follow up with written comments. But I think it's very important that we get people showing up for this, because we actually requested this hearing, and it is very likely that industry will be turning out in droves for this hearing to make sure that they get on the record. And so we really do need people to show up from our side of the issue to really express an interest in having the state do a better job of regulating. So I couldn't, and I'm so thankful that you all are here. So thank you so much for coming and for everything that you're doing to prepare. I saw Patty and then Lois.
Yeah.
Joyce, yes.
You're muted.
Oh, Patty,
I have a question about the making a comment. So if you sign up for that, if you were going to make a verbal comment, would you have to wait for a long time before making a comment, or can you just record a comment? Or
I could be wrong about this, but if you have to make a comment early on in the process and you need to make it and not wait for all of the public comments to go through, Albert suggested first signing up as soon as possible, because they might be a lot of people and they might not get to all comments, which is a possibility. But I also noticed that on the notice, there's someone, I believe you can email at IEPA or to let them know that you need to go first.
okay. Is the hearing from to a certain time? Is it like from when till when?
Yes, it's in our newsletter, and I have a feeling you might not have gotten our newsletter. I copied and pasted all that, and Patty, I will send that to you as soon as we get off the call.
Well, and I'd like to have that too.
Can you just put the link? Can you put the link in the chat also to wherever the information is to get to the site, to the EPA site?
Okay. Michael, can you do that?
Yes, if you can send me the link for commenting, I'm sure Danny can find it real quick and send it over to me.
Yep.
So what time does the hearing start and end?
Okay, so I just put it in the chat box. I'm just gonna pull up the notice really quick so we all have it. Let's see. It's going to start at 6:30 p.m. on Thursday, the 25th. And yes, and the Illinois EPA will present opening statements and announce the hearing procedures prior to accepting comments from the public. So Albert explained this to me earlier today. IEPA will probably go through a little bit of an introduction, and then likely they'll open it up for public comment. And I think they want lengthier technical comments to be submitted in writing. So I don't know, Albert, if you have a sense, they don't necessarily put it here, but try to keep statements under a minute or two. Would that be your recommendation?
I really don't know how they're going to handle this. I've never been on one of these virtually. I've been to two or, maybe a half a dozen NIPID's permit hearings over the years. If there's a ton of people who've all signed up, they'll the hearing officer will probably try and restrict everyone to something like 3 minutes. So if you got something you're really burning to say, you better not hem and haw a lot and talk about how all your neighbors are wonderful people. So that's the only thing I would say. In terms of how long you'll have to wait, I can't promise anything. These hearings are not always run terribly well. So sign up to speak, and if they don't get to you before you have to go somewhere, then you'll just have to submit written comments later. But do the best you can. And like I said, I've never done one of these virtually. It'll be a trip.
Okay, thank you.
Oops, I think you're muted, Lois.
Sorry, I thought I hit it. Anyway, I joined in for the coal ash hearings back in the fall, and they actually gave me a time block. After I signed up, I was supposed to between 1 and 1:15 or something like that. So they actually gave me a time block, and if people weren't there to speak, then then they just called names, and people spoke as they were called, and if they weren't there, they would just call the next name. So that's how that works.
The IEPA will have learned from that, but that was the PCB, and they're a slightly different organization.
Yeah,
they may, IEPA has been kind of loose. They've had a lot of different hearing officers over the years. Some of them have known what they were doing. Some of them were jerks.
I would like to make some comments referring to Illinois resource-rich areas and request that new stricter guidelines be put in place for those resource-rich areas. I don't
What do you
know.
mean by resource-rich?
Resource-rich? Those are areas that have been designated by the Illinois Department of Natural Resource as having rare and special natural resources like biologically significant stream, endangered species, Illinois natural inventory areas, fish and wildlife sites, state parks, forest reserves, and so on.
And you were going to ask IEPA to make sure there's more stringent standards for those areas?
Yes.
Yes, I know that so this is a water permit. And one thing I want to say, and you guys can stop me if this is like just too, I don't know, 30,000 foot, but this permit is the Clean Water Act permit to control discharges from CAFOs and their land application areas. And so you're making a very good point, and I think that it needs to be made. So I'm not saying that's not a good point to make, but it just made me think about the fact that a lot of people, when you're dealing with CAFOs, you're dealing with odor, you're dealing with flies, you're dealing with feathers, you're dealing with all of these things, and these impacts always escape the boundaries of the CAFO itself, right? Always. Public health impacts, MRSA, all different kinds of pharmaceuticals going into the water, all those things. And so, but when you frame your comments, you don't want to lose the point. So remember that you're talking to an agency that's responsible for controlling water pollution. And that's what the purpose of this permit is. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't cross over into areas of odor control and waste management, because the whole purpose behind the permit is to help these guys manage their waste so they don't pollute. And usually if they're not properly managing it, then that causes air pollution and everything else. So there's a tie-in usually to just about anything, but I just want to make that point clear. So to the extent you all have firsthand experience or major concerns about water pollution, and it could be well water too, because it does have some guidelines for where they put things in terms of wells and drinking water. But that should be the primary focus. And again, it's not to say you guys shouldn't talk about what else is going on in rural communities, because a lot of people need to be educated about the impacts of CAFOs beyond just the water pollution. That's just, you know.
I have a
Yes,
question.
I was going to be referring in my comments to a report that was created by Applied Ecological from Broadhead, Wisconsin. Steve Affelbaum, you may be familiar with him. This report explains how water pollution from CAFOs could very negatively impact these resource-rich areas beyond repair. I wasn't going to take the time to go into that, but Dennis was going to be addressing that report.
Oh, good.
That's fantastic. And you know, we do have karst area up in northern Illinois like they do in Wisconsin, in that Broadhead area, and so that'll be amazing.
Yeah. I put together a fact sheet, and you may not have all seen it. I've kind of broken it down just into bullet points. And I took this a lot from what Danny's put together. And I don't know, have any of you seen the fact sheets at all? Because I'm going to make sure you get those at the end of this call. We've got four major points: that Illinois boasts a particularly intensive livestock industry. We're fourth the largest hog producer in the country, and we have some of the weakest regulations, although our setbacks aren't quite as bad as some others. But as far as the permitting, we're at the bottom of the barrel. We won the race to the bottom, is what we say. We have abundance of surface waters, nearly 120,000 stream miles, like where you're coming from with the resource-rich areas, and over 300,000 lakes and rivers, or lake acres. We have an extensive tile drain system in the state that's draining manure off-site into our water resources. So that's one of the reasons why we want this permit as well. And our long winters force our operators to apply. Now, there is a rule that they cannot apply on frozen or snow-covered ground if there's I think it's a 15% slope, but nobody's going out there and measuring this. And the only way I find out is when people call me and say they're applying on snow, and then we'll have to call and report that. That shouldn't be the way it is. So those are the four biggest points. But some of the other ones that I think are really important, Danny, is that okay if I talk about those a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. Pursuant to federal law, CAFOs had to submit their waste management plans, and those plans need to be made available to the public for comment. So this is one of the things that if there is an NPDES permit at a facility, the public can actually weigh in. And Danny, jump in if I'm saying something incorrect.
Yeah, no,
it gives us more transparency. And since we have to regulate these things from our backyards anyway, we should be able to see those waste management plans and really keep track. And that's a hard thing to do as a citizen, but it makes it more, we're able to weigh in on that. Correct, Danny?
Yes, and I want to put a fine point on this, because this is one of our major talking points that you all, I'm sure you understand this if you've lived through this, but in Illinois, we have two regulatory entities that are responsible for CAFOs. The Department of Agriculture oversees the siting and construction process. Once they're sited and constructed, then it becomes the responsibility of the Illinois EPA to ensure they don't pollute. Every other state in this region has both a construction permitting process and an operating permitting process and entity, which means once they're constructed, if you have an operating permit, then the other agencies, similar like an NPDES permit is an operating permit, then the facility is subject to regular monitoring, reporting, oversight when they have this permit, because that's basically the regulatory mechanism that the agency uses to regulate once a facility is up and operating. For CAFOs, NPDES permits require the submittal of a waste management plan as part of the permit application process. And then also that whole process is open for public input. And so the public then gets to weigh in on whether or not the waste management plan is adequate. The agency has that information. And then the terms, if the permit gets approved, then those terms of the nutrient management plan become totally enforceable.
Mhm.
Now, if let's say the agency approves a CAFO with a really bad waste management plan and the public is provided access, because one of the biggest, most important parts of the Clean Water Act is the public transparency and public input process on every single permit that issues. The general permit is a big permit. We're talking about a permit that's going to cover all the CAFOs in the state for the most part. Arguably, it should. But each individual CAFO, when it applies for coverage, it has to submit its waste management plan as part of its permit application. And then it has to meet the terms of this permit, and it has to have an adequate waste management plan that is available for public comment, scrutiny, and appeal.
Yeah.
You can appeal it in court and you have standing, unlike under the LMFA, which is administered by the Department of Agriculture, where there's no access to any of that information and you don't have any standing. Under the Clean Water Act, it is a completely different picture. And so one of the biggest points that we're trying to make here in this forum that I can't quite figure out if we've already gotten there or not, because I keep reading this permit and I get more confused every time I read it, because it looks like they're requiring all CAFOs to have these now based on a few of the paragraphs, but then on some other paragraphs, they're falling back on the old IEPA way of saying, you don't need a permit unless you've already polluted, and you probably need to pollute like at least 10 times and have it be catastrophic before we actually make you get a permit. That's the Illinois EPA sort of way that it's done regulation over CAFOs up until now. But in this new permit, it says something different than the last one, but I can't quite tell if they're actually going to require all CAFOs to have coverage, but they should, because then that gives the public the opportunity to not only weigh in, but also you have access to those waste management plans. So if a CAFO in your area isn't following its waste management plan, you can call IEPA and say, there is a violation of the plan. You don't even have to prove that a catastrophic pollution event occurred. They are violating their waste management plan. I can see them land applying in the rain right now. Here are the pictures. If IEPA doesn't do anything, you can go in and do your own enforcement action. Two, you have that ability under this permitting scheme. And that's why one of the biggest points that we have is IEPA needs to be requiring all CAFOs to have these. And every other state, back to my point, has some kind of operating permit requirement for all CAFOs. Most are very much like NPDES permits or are. Enough said.
Question?
Question. The proposed changes, if they are enacted, does that get us to what we want? It's used properly, which means, well, actually at all. But at the proposed changes that they've given us, does that get to that? Or is there more? Because it's unclear, like you said. I don't.
To me, it's unclear. And it would be very un-IEPA-like to require all CAFOs to have permit coverage. And so, but I keep reading it and it keeps, and so in the public, in the permit itself, in the public, there's a, well, I I'm a lawyer and I get confused by it. Everyone else, it will make me feel better if you're confused too. I think we need to ask the question, what CAFOs does this cover? And if it's not covering all large CAFOs, it needs to, because we know they all discharge. They do. And they discharge not necessarily from their production areas, but from their land application areas. And most of them claim this ag stormwater exemption, which is allowed without a permit if you're doing things the right way, I guess under federal law. But most of them do it and they don't actually qualify for that exemption anyway. So they all really need to have the permit. And Albert, I feel like you need to say something. You don't want, you can, but
I think we should go, you should go ahead and say what you can. I know that their position is that they can have all these restrictions because this only applies to discharging CAFOs, and most of the CAFOs don't believe they discharge, or at least they don't believe they'll ever get caught discharging. So that's the problem. So we want a strong permit so that the ones who get it at least will be controlled. And then how we're going to make sure that these entities get the permit, that's another whole fight.
Yeah. One of the things that we found is, well, Danny and ICCAW tried to see how many CAFOs were in operation in the state of Illinois, and we found more than the IEPA even knew were there. And that's part of, that should be part of the job. They should be registering with the IEPA as soon as they get, that should just be a given. And also the owners, the contact information for the owners, investors, all of that information should be readily available. And that's not either, because they hide behind LLCs quite a bit of the time. And that's another thing that we're asking for. So for those of you who aren't attorneys, the list that I have that I can share with you is very basic, and it will get the point across that in that way. Another thing that you can ask for are larger setbacks from groundwater and surface water, and monitoring of those waters. And I think greater setbacks. What else, Danny?
you can talk.
What kind of monitoring is there? Is there any required?
Not, well, if under the permit,
yeah,
I don't think there is very strong monitoring. And Albert, you might want to weigh in on this because we talked about this a little bit today. But they need to keep records, definitely, of their waste management, and they're supposed to turn in those records and how they manage their waste on an annual basis or semi-annual basis. I have to go back and look now because my memory's not fresh, but we need more monitoring. I think that's a very good point. That
those reports should be put on a website or something.
And we found that, they're only inspected once every how many years. I mean, during Danny's research, and they've cut back with so many inspectors at IEPA. I don't know if they've replaced any lately, but within the last several years, they've cut way down on the amount of inspectors that are even out there.
This is a big point to make. And I know that John Kim, the director of Illinois EPA, I know he gets this. And so this is something that I think the public does need to push is IEPA can't be everywhere. And they're definitely not out in the middle of rural Illinois watching for problems. And CAFOs, they pollute. They do it all the time. We're calling in complaints all the time. And no one ever gets out there in time to catch them in the act. And they really need people on the ground that are watching these things happen. And, they really need to make information transparent so the public can help enforce the Clean Water Act. And that's really a huge part of, there was so much wisdom behind that law when it was enacted, which was the public should be part of the regulating process, because the agency can't be everywhere all at once. And these are not typical point sources where, you have a pipe going into a stream and they are discharging constantly, and there's a, you know, they're monitoring their discharge, and those reports just automatically get generated. With CAFOs, they're land applying a couple times a year, trying to get rid of their waste. Most of the time it's springtime. They can't land apply when they should. So then they're out there doing all kinds of crazy stuff, trying to get rid of the waste that they can't handle. They don't have enough land to handle it anyway. And we don't even see these waste management plans. So we know they're over land applying on any piece of ground they can find. And so really the need for public transparency on the waste management plans, and as well as with enforcement, that is the only way that we're going to get a handle on this industry in particular. And John Kim knows that. He's the new director of the Illinois EPA. We have a good governor and really need to push this agency. If they don't start requiring permits or registration or some kind of submittal of waste management plans from these CAFOs, they will not get a handle on this industry, and they really do need the public's help to do it.
Yeah, there's also been pollution from the dead animal mortality sites where they compost the bodies of the swine and whatever, and there's runoff. I have photos of runoff from that going into the waters of the state in my county, and Crystal has that in her county. So it's not just land application either. The way they're handling that, one of the things that they are not forced to do is put a roof over these dead animal mortality bins where they're composted with sawdust, and that should be a given. And what's happening is the runoff is seeking its lowest point and going to the nearest surface water from these, if there isn't a berm around them and if they haven't been taken care of properly. And people have no ability to see on the property what's happening. That's another issue, is that we don't see what's happening on the property because we don't want to ever trespass. So
May I make a point?
yes.
Danny was talking about permit needing to be required for all CAFOs. We just recently uncovered our little town, 3 miles from the CAFO, has 250 people in it. The village was fined, it was less than $5,000. I can't remember just exactly what it was, because on a hot summer day, the lagoon stunk. And then they found out that they didn't have all of the paperwork that was supposed to be done. So here you have a CAFO that had, I can't do the math in my head, but there's 250 people in the town and 5,000 hogs there. They are producing more waste than the town does. They're getting more antibiotics than the town does. And yet the EPA requires the town to have an NPDES permit, but doesn't require these CAFOs who have polluted not to have the permits. Just real quickly, the second thing on the composting, most composting operations in the state of Illinois are required to have permits. And I know it sounds like whining, but if we're doing it for one industry, why are we not doing it for all? If we're making villages have them, why not everybody? I'm done.
And I can tell you one thing, that tiny little village probably has less funding to create their than the CAFO, because the CAFO, it might be someone under contract, but behind the guy that's under contract, it's Purdue or tight, who knows.
And the village didn't get 180 days to correct the problem. They got fined. They didn't get EPA's 180 days.
And how long did it take you to get anything accomplished in with your CAFO?
Well, we're getting there.
I know.
Just
months.
haven't given up, but yeah.
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
It seems to me there should be perhaps something I would put in my comments, that there should be a place for the public on their website to report these things that you find.
Well, there's a place at the EPA where you can report things that they find. And
for CAFOs?
Okay. Yeah.
Is it easy? Can you find it easily, or is it?
Yeah, it's pretty easy. In fact, I've turned the same one in a couple of different times in the last couple of months, and it still hasn't been taken care of. So we've gone up the ladder, but it seems like you have to really be the squeaky wheel to get anything done, and that shouldn't be the case. All of these other industries have permits. There's a number count of how many there are. Why should agriculture be any different? And they claim that, you know, they claim they don't discharge, but that doesn't give them the right, the state, the right to not even know how many CAFOs we have in the entire state of Illinois. That's not acceptable. So, yeah, when we were contacted, they said, well, we can't keep track of all of them. If we get complaints about one, they're getting complaints about CAFOs that they didn't even know existed. And they said, well, we would put it in our database. Honestly, Danny, do you remember that occasion?
But
so,
Aaron, I want to know, are they required to, but they just don't? Or are they not required to register with the EPA? That's what I'm not clear about. Is it just the matter that they don't do what they're supposed to, or?
No, they don't, they're not required to,
Not required.
but we've been,
That's what I
they are
thought.
not required to, but we've been pushing for that for a while in lieu of the agency requiring all facilities to have NPDES permits. We had a bill a couple years ago that would have had all CAFOs just register their existence with IEPA once a year and then file their waste management plan if they had one. If they had one. And that to us said, not only those that would be made available to the public, but also to IEPA to know which CAFOs that might need to be looked at. And IEPA fought.
They fought a bill that would make their lives easier.
It is their responsibility to exercise regulatory control over activities subject to regulation. And so they really it's their responsibility to have a handle on this agency and on this industry, but they don't, and they've chosen not to. And I don't know, Albert knows more about what else IEPA does, because I primarily work on CAFOs, but I can say that they have been avoiding trying to do anything on CAFOs as long as I've been in this work. But I do, again, feel like we have a good administration and the director, I think he is sympathetic to this, to at least our cause. I don't know, the agency's always been overly influenced by ag though, as the legislature is. So
Well, IEPA is actually less influenced by ag, obviously, than the Department of Agriculture, which is pretty much a branch of the Farm Bureau.
Yes.
So all I'd say about the hearing is just remember this is a water permit, so you can get to other issues tangentially to a certain extent. I don't know how the hearing officer is going to be. If you get way off of water and start talking about things that don't relate to water at all, they might give you trouble. On the other hand, if you've only got a 3-minute time limit, then he may not care or she may not care. As to some of these other issues on enforcement, they are very badly understaffed. And I think the main thing, the biggest problem on the CAFOs is we don't have effective monitoring. The reason some little village gets nailed, and the reason the 20,000 hog unit can make a bunch of stink, and the 200 person village gets nailed is the 200 person village has to file a discharge monitoring report every month. And if the report shows violations, it's a very easy matter to go after them. Your permit says you're not supposed to discharge more than 10 milligrams per liter total suspended solids. You say you discharge 35 is bigger than 10, you lose. There's nothing like that with the CAFOs. So that's part of the problem. If you're an understaffed agency, it's a lot easier to bring a case based on a discharge monitoring report than it is to go out leave your nice, comfortable desk and drive out into the country somewhere, go to some godforsaken, smelly place and see rotting hogs with water running off of them. I mean, I ask you, would you want to do that? So I think that's a lot of the problem. So we should try and ask for tight monitoring. We should try and ask for good plans. And if the agency is good, they'll give us the most that they think they can. I wouldn't say IEPA is so much beholden to big ag, is that they're just vastly overstaffed, understaffed, and they don't feel like this is their primary job. Their primary job is to go after polluting factories and sewage treatment plants, and they defer to Department of Agriculture on a lot of this stuff. And of course, Department of Agriculture says, well, we're not going to enforce any of this stuff because that's IEPA's problem.
That's right. They passed the buck.
This isn't making me feel any better.
I have a question about self-monitoring.
Yeah.
I mean, couldn't that be pretty easily abused as well?
It can be. It depends on the context. I'm talking more than I wanted to, but or probably should be. But on the discharge monitoring reports, yeah, it sounds pretty crazy. We don't expect bank robbers to fill out a report every time they rob a bank in order to explain, which banks they were at and how much money they took. But the problem here is that on the discharge monitoring reports, it's a pretty serious offense to file a fraudulent discharge monitoring report. If you don't file one at all, then eventually they'll go after you. If you file one that's fraudulent, that's a criminal offense. On the other hand, if you file one that just shows a violation, they may come after you and they may not, and it'll probably be a small fine or a slap on the wrist. So I think that most quasi-legitimate businesses file the reports and they probably, I've looked at a lot of discharge monitoring reports. The other problem is, though, it's generally not the sharpest guy in the firm who's in charge of filling out these reports. And so they do things like miss decimal points, put things in the wrong boxes, and that can be a problem.
Well, in my community, where our mega dairy was in Elmwood, we filed FOIAs. They have monitoring wells around the lagoon there because of the situation. And they're supposed to file quarterly reports on their monitoring wells. And we filed FOIAs on that, and they hadn't even been doing that. And then once we filed a FOIA, then they were turning them in. And they're tested by them. It's not an independent party that comes out and does it. They do their own test and take it. So there's just, even the monitoring that they're supposed to be doing, I am sure is not getting done, because it didn't at least get done in Peoria County near our mega dairy. We only realized that after we filed FOIAs to see the results, and they hadn't been done. So somebody had their hand up.
Yes. So don't the facilities report their existence to the Department of Agriculture? And if so, why doesn't the Department of Agriculture just inform IEPA? Or is that too simple?
Annie can answer that one.
So they are supposed to be sharing information based on our petition. They were supposed to come up with an agreement with DOA for information sharing, but we FOIA'd DOA's records and IEPA's records, and they never ever line up. They might now, because they start to, once we start asking for information, then they start exchanging, but the state still doesn't have an accurate accounting because not every CAFO goes to DOA for a permit. And there are a lot of CAFOs out there that didn't before there was the LMFA. And so, but I will say, DOA probably does have the better accounting since it enacted the Livestock Management Facilities Act. I think it was the late 90s. But it still doesn't have a full accounting, and IEPA and DOA just don't have the regular sharing of information as they should. But I mean, we found 4 or 5 large poultry CAFOs up in, I forget, it was Whiteside County, and DOA had no idea they were there. No idea. And so,
in the days of, pandemics, it's a public health problem if they don't have an accounting. They should know where these facilities are located because of the transmission of disease that exchange between animals and humans to animals. So that's another reason why we should have an accounting of all these facilities, especially poultry, because they just found the first H5N8 in Russia this past week, transferred to humans, of that version of bird flu. And these are going to keep mutating over the years, and they're mutating faster and faster. And these facilities, the fact that they do not know where all of them are is a part of a whole bigger picture of a public health issue. I'll get off the soapbox now.
I will get off the soapbox too, but we have been saying this for ever since I started doing this work. This has been one of the talking points is, these are breeding grounds for superbugs and these types of diseases. And in fact, coronavirus, I mean, I think they've traced it to a bat, but I mean, that is the type of disease that is common, and like that type, this is where they're coming from, or will be, or have been. Yeah. They have been.
Several years ago, a form of coronavirus was tracked to swine facilities in China, and they ended up culling all of those animals, but that really didn't make big news. But to tell you the truth, they think now that the dust can carry the particles of disease. And folks who lived in North Carolina, when swine flu epidemic back in 2012, when they looked at the entire state, the counties with the highest levels of swine, those populations were the first and highest of swine flu. They've even there's been an Illinois study done on C. diff, and people who live in zip codes where there's swine facilities have a higher level of that. And a brand new study just came out about C. diff and MRSA, and MRSA in swine workers, but the C. diff can be carried out of the facility. So there's other things that they're finding out every month. There's something new, but just the fact that those folks who lived in those counties got swine flu first is showing that, yeah, there is a connection.
And really impressing in this context, impressing on the agency that, it is the responsible agency for regulating these things once they're up and operating to protect public health and the environment. If there's a public health component to that responsibility, because all of these things, they travel through the environment. And so I want to make sure that, that gets pushed in that context too.
Does the Department of Public Health have anything to say?
Well, I was at when they were debating the 8 siting criteria, the person who represented the Illinois Department of Public Health spoke before me and said that there is no evidence that CAFOs cause disease. And when we met out in the hallway for break, he said, I'd never want to live next to one of these. They really have very little input. There's nothing. There's really no input. And even though the American Public Health Association and the National Association of City and County Health Boards within the last 2 years called for a moratorium on these facilities because the health effects are not fully understood and they're more negative than positive. So there, you know, these health boards represent health boards all over the country. And I spoke with the National Association of Local Boards of Health. I traveled out to Colorado and they had questions about this because people are calling these health boards with questions and they don't know how to answer them. And they also have been, their hands have been tied. Their hands have been tied in Missouri, in Iowa, and most recently right now in Tennessee. Farm Bureau is pushing a bill along with other ag interests to take away any type of control from the health departments over these facilities. So they're probably sharing the same language across state lines. We know that they do. So they really don't have any, except for when they're putting a facility in and there is an abandoned well on site. If a neighbor knows about it and has done their research, that well should be closed. And we have a site in Adams County where the well was not properly closed and there's a facility either right on top of an abandoned well or directly next to an abandoned well. And we tried like heck, and we have photos of them flipping it over and continuing with construction. So it's a constant battle for us to be out there and monitoring and taking photographic evidence and going to the regulators. It's not something I thought I'd spend my retirement doing. And we shouldn't all have to do that, but
I don't see why a young person like you should be thinking about retirement. But I'm gonna retire for the evening, I think.
Thank you, Albert. I'm so sorry I didn't include you. You were my very first person.
Just you know, don't get flustered. The hearing officer probably will not. The hearing officer probably will be polite to all the questioners. That they fired the last one who wasn't, so they probably all got religion. And you know, try and focus on water, speak your piece succinctly, and then on the technical stuff, if you know a lot of the technical stuff and you want to speak about it, fine. But remember, we do get 30 days after this to supply written comments. So when I go to one of these hearings, you know, I don't read them a bunch of statutes. You know, this violates 144.2 little ID. You know, I try and make general points, ask general questions, and then later we can write the comment that points out the specific problems with the permit in terms of the law and submit any sort of articles. In fact, we may want to submit articles on waterborne diseases if we've got scientific articles on that.
If anyone needs articles on waterborne disease, I keep a water sheet with links and short descriptions of those studies. So I could be of help. If anybody would like to contact me,
Yes.
I think everyone has my email, but it's Karen H, KARENH at S as in Sam, RA project.org. Karen H at sraproject.org.
Albert. Oh, I'm sorry, Karen. I know.
Sorry, Albert.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming and for your helping us through this.
All right. Well, I'll try and sign up to be there tomorrow, but I'll probably want to sign up late. I don't, you know, you don't know how this is going to work out. If there are 10,000 speakers and you're the last one there, they may not get to you. So I want to be coy. And on the other hand, if I know somebody's behind me who wants to speak, who they've heard from less than me, I might just pass, you know, so we'll have to see how things work out.
Okay, as long as you're there.
I'll be there, and I will be there on the line. I'll be right behind you, Danny.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I owe you. Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
So Joyce has been with us and she has to leave. Thank you, Joyce, for being with us.
Thank you.
We can connect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If
and I have
anyone
to
wants to
leave too.
call me, my phone number is 309-208-8846. And I thank Danny for being the brains on the NPDES issues. She's training me as we go. So I'm still learning just as you all folks are all learning. So anything that I don't know, I'll go to Danny and I'll find out the correct answer, but I can provide everything from studies to the talking points I put together that are very easy. There's just two and a half pages here that I just did bullet points. That's very easy for you to pick what you'd like to say and use. So I'll get those to you.
Oh, well, I'll just read it. Karen actually knows more than me about everything. So she can help you guys. She's a library. So studies, report, anything you need, obviously, you know, Karen. And thank you all for coming. It's important. And the more people you can get to turn out, it's great. But we so appreciate your time and energy going into this. And
so the other thing is, you know, we usually have an ICCAW meeting. Because of COVID, we're not doing that. And I think you know, if we want to get together and exchange ideas and just get together as ICCAW and even have a few speakers, because I have folks that would love to talk to my group in Illinois. I think that we should be doing that in the future. I know people are zoomed out. I don't want to burn people out on Zoom, but it's good to see faces and not to have to travel 300 miles. But you know, Barb's so far down south, and so are some of you others, and over in, you know, urban or Champaign-Urbana, and I'm here up in Peoria County. So it's good to see faces and connect, and I really appreciate all of you. Crystal's been through hell, and she's one woman to give so much. She gives me energy just watching what she does, and I've learned a lot from her as well. And Dennis's group has just made terrific progress, and I'm always here to talk if anyone needs to talk or you have ideas, and we'll leave it at that, I guess. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate all your time.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay. In our one particular situation with the chicken farm that is, you know, the property is adjacent to our drinking water source, our lake. Anyway, when they first got their permit, they were able to use this little stream that went west of the facility as the water source and totally ignored the lake. Isn't there something where they should have to take into account a drinking water source, especially for tens of thousands of people, which is our situation? And so is there anything in the permit that requires special consideration for being next to a drinking water source?
yeah, it's usually for placement where they're placing the CAFO, not for water withdrawals though. And water withdrawal and usage, that's a whole nother area, but it's a good, you know.
I'm not talking about water withdrawal. I'm talking about, you know, if there was a big weather event where there would be an overflow and it would go into the lake.
Oh, if it is the drinking water source, they have.
Yeah, it's a drinking water source, and they totally
Yeah.
ignored it.
Wow. Well, they shouldn't have, I don't think, because they need to have certain setbacks from drinking water supplies and community water supplies. And that's actually in the comments that we submitted, because they had temporary manure stacks and setbacks for those that weren't adequate. For the CAFOs themselves, now, Karen.
Kathy Martin would be a good person for me to consult with that.
Yeah,
because she would know the answer right off the bat and actually go right at it. And
yeah, because there's something wrong. There is something wrong. The older Illinois EPA regs that were in place before the LMFA had those setbacks, and then they started ignoring them. And now under the LMFA, you can pretty much put a CAFO on top of a stream.
Yeah.
Crazy.
You can, really.
But the land application areas and stuff have setbacks. But so this is a good point and a good question, I think. And
Barbara, I'm gonna get back with you on that, and we'll get together with Kathy Martin possibly, and we can answer some questions on that and add that to it. There's also this bad bill that Danny and we think it's a bad bill, but we're doing some more research on it, and I'm to get a call from Senator Kaler's office tomorrow because it's not in his realm. So they're going to let me know more about it, and Danny's looking into it as well, right, Danny?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I have to run, but I'm looking at it and we'll totally follow up. But
the sponsor is on the Activator, which is a new like PAC group for Farm Bureau. So that doesn't give me a good feeling. So I'm going to keep looking at it. Dennis and I have talked about it. And as soon as we find out more information about that, I'm going to get it out to everyone, and we'll try to do a campaign about that if they try to push that through. So I'm going to have everyone's email. You have my phone number. And Barbara, let's get together and talk about that issue. And thank you, everybody. I appreciate all your time and help. So
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
thank you.
Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, great.
Thank you, Michael.